Before we get started, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from today. And if you love these real-life tales as much as I do, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. The eastern horizon was just beginning to glow when Tom Calloway emerged from his weather-beaten cabin, the familiar scent of salt and diesel oil greeting him like an old friend. He paused for a moment on the creaking wooden dock, adjusting the brim of his trusty brown cap down over his silver-streaked hair and tugging his yellow oilskin coat tighter against the cool morning breeze. His heavy boots, soles worn smooth by decades of tread, thumped against the planks as he climbed aboard the Lucky Catch, a small fishing skiff that had carried him through more storms and sunrises than he cared to count. Tom ran a seasoned hand along the boat's rail, tracing decades of dings and patches. He stowed his linen sack of gear, a coil of rope, a battered tackle box, and a thermos of strong black coffee, and settled into the helm. His fingers found the familiar grooves of the throttle and ignition switch. With a sputter and a cough, the engine roared to life, its steady thrum vibrating through the hull like a heartbeat. As the Lucky Catch glided away from the dock, the pale sky spilled lavender and gold across the glassy water, and Tom allowed himself a small smile. This was home. He headed for his usual fishing ground, about half a mile offshore, where the shallows dipped into deeper blue and the currents brought in snappers and grouper. It was a route he knew blindfolded. Every buoy, channel marker, and submerged wreck had been etched into his memory over 60 years at sea. Today, however, his mind wasn't on fish. He found himself musing over how the tides had shaped his life, how each ebb and flow marked the passing of seasons and the turning of years. He'd always been a solitary man, preferring the company of gulls and waves to that of harbor chatter. Yet lately, Tom felt those days slipping away. The future of his little fishing business seemed as unpredictable as the weathered forecast reports he'd consulted every dawn. Still, he pressed on, the Lucky Catch responding to his touch like an old friend waking from slumber. Just as the first bird calls broke the silence, a flash of cerulean caught his eye, brief, bright, and impossibly out of place. Tom squinted, leaning forward. Had he imagined it? He frowned and killed the engine, letting the boat drift. The engine's growl faded into the soft slap of water against the hull. Heart thumping, Tom rose and stepped onto the deck. His boots shifted quietly. He crept toward the hatch over the fish hold, an area he'd never once had to inspect for stowaways. The air felt suddenly heavy, and every sound seemed amplified. A faint creak in the wood, the rustle of canvas in the breeze, the distant cry of a gull. A soft, trembling whimper broke the hush. Tom froze, hand hovering over the latch. He remembered years ago hearing about refugees making dangerous sea crossings in battered boats, stories that had stirred his compassion and fear in equal measure. He gulped, then flipped the latch and heaved the hatch open. There, huddled in the dingy corner, was a little boy, no more than 6 years old. He wore a bright blue life vest, too clean for these rough waters, and his small shoulders shook as he pressed himself into the dark wood. His eyes, wide with terror, reflected the weak dawn light. Tom's seasoned heart clenched. The boy's lip quivered as he stared up at Tom, and for a moment there was only silence. Then the child's voice, soft and broken, found the space between them. "Please, don't hurt me." His accent was unfamiliar, laced with fear and exhaustion. Tom swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "Hey there, son. My name's Tom. I'm not gonna hurt you." He crouched down to the boy's level, careful not to make sudden moves. "But you gotta tell me how you got here, and who you're running from." The boy's gaze flicked toward the boat's edge, as if measuring how close he might be to safety or to danger. He opened his mouth, then shook his head, tears glistening. Tom recognized that look, the raw panic of a child who has seen more hardship than he should ever have to know. Tom reached out, placing a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe on my boat." He paused, searching the child's eyes. "I promise I won't send you back, but we need to get you somewhere you can be protected." The boy's gaze wavered between hope and doubt, and Tom knew this was a turning point. He lifted the boy gently from the hold and wrapped his coat around the shivering shoulders. The lucky catch rocked softly beneath them, and Tom felt the weight of responsibility settle on his broad back. He wiped a calloused thumb across the boy's cheek, careful to remove streaks of salt water and grime. "Let's get you warmed up," he said softly. "I've got coffee in the cabin, and some dry clothes back at the dock. Then we'll figure out who sent you here, and how to help you." As he guided the boy toward the wheelhouse, Tom glanced at the rising sun. The day had taken an unexpected turn, but he felt a spark of purpose he hadn't known in months. Today, he realized, wasn't just another dawn on the Florida Keys. It was the start of something new, a chance to rewrite both their stories, mile by mile, wave by wave, together. Before we get started, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from today. And if you love these real-life tales, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Tom Calloway guided the lucky catch away from the worn wooden dock just as the dawn light began to soften the horizon. The Florida Keys air, heavy with salt and the faint aroma of diesel, filled his lungs and reminded him why he'd spent a lifetime at sea. His yellow oilskin coat, frayed at the seams, flapped softly in the breeze, and the familiar rumble of the engine beneath his calloused hands felt like a heartbeat he could trust. Half a mile offshore, he eased the boat to a stop near his usual fishing grounds, where the shifting currents promised snappers and grouper, and leaned back to admire the pale pink and gold sky. But the moment his gaze drifted, a flash of bright blue near the fish hold jolted him upright. He killed the engine, letting the lucky catch drift, and crept forward. A faint whimper reached his ears, and Tom's heart thudded. He lifted the hatch and was met by two frightened eyes, framed by tousled hair and a tiny life vest far too clean for these waters. The boy, barely 6, shrank back, murmuring, "Please, don't hurt me." His accent was soft, each word tinged with exhaustion. Tom crouched, careful not to startle him further. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he rasped, "but you've got to tell me how you got here, and who you're hiding from." The boy glanced at his ankle, where a small electronic device blinked with a faint red light. Tom's suspicion flared. "What's that on your leg?" he asked, pointing. The child swallowed hard. "Swim thing," he whispered. "Tracker. The word hit Tom like a rogue wave. Stories of unaccompanied children fleeing danger flashed through his mind. "You lost your folks or your group?" Tom ventured. The boy nodded, hope flickering briefly in his wide eyes. Tom rubbed his forehead, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. The thin film of cataracts in his own eyes prickled in the morning light as he sighed. "Listen, boy," he said, voice gruff but gentle. "I'm just an old fisherman. I don't want to get tangled up in whatever this is." He stood, knees creaking. "I'm taking this boat back to the harbor. When we get there, you'll have to go. I can't keep you here. It'll only lead to trouble." Tears welled in the child's eyes as he cried, "Please, let me stay." Tom's resolve wavered at the sight of the boy's desperation, but he shook his head firmly. "No way," he muttered. "It's back to the dock for you." Seeing the boy's face fall, Tom felt a twinge of guilt. "Look," he softened, "you can stay in the fish hold if you want, or there's a cabin down below that's warmer." The boy only shook his head, preferring the tight corner he'd claimed. Tom nodded, respecting his choice, and climbed back to the helm. The engine's steady hum filled the air as Tom steered toward shore, knuckles white, the gentle rocking reminding him of the sea's permanence and his own fragility. A harsh cough ripped through his chest, the familiar rattle in his lungs a reminder that time was not on his side. "Damn it all," he muttered, wiping his mouth. He thought about how the sea that had been his life was now creeping into his lungs, each breath a negotiation with mortality. The harbor grew nearer, its weathered pilings welcoming yet uneasy. Tom's mind spun with questions. Would the boy bolt at first chance? Should he call someone? Authorities? The Coast Guard? As the Lucky Catch nudged its usual berth, Tom's years of experience kicked in. He cut the engine and took a moment to steady himself. Descending again to the fish hold, he found the boy where he'd left him, small shoulders trembling. "All right," Tom said, his voice rough but kind. "We're back. Time for you to go." He reached a hand down, and the boy clung to the edge, shaking his head, eyes brimming with terror. Frustration flared in Tom's chest. This was supposed to be simple. Bring the boy back, avoid any fuss, return to his routine. But nothing about this felt simple. He pulled out his phone, finger hovering over the emergency call button. "Look," he said sternly, "if you won't leave, I'll have to call the police. They'll sort this out." At the word police, the child's composure shattered. He fell into uncontrollable sobs, begging, "Please, no police. I'm scared." Tom froze, heart pounding. The boy's fear resonated with a long-buried memory of himself as a small boy sneaking onto his grandfather's boat, torn between adventure and dread. He remembered the rough but loving hands that rescued him. Tom lowered his phone. "Hey," he whispered, placing it gently back in his pocket. He gathered the boy into his arms, feeling the child's body shake with sobs. "Shh," Tom soothed, rocking him slightly. "You're safe now. I won't call anyone." As he carried the boy toward the cabin below, the harbor noises faded and only the two of them remained. An old fisherman and a lost child, bound together by fear, hope, and the vast, unpredictable sea. And for the first time in months, Tom felt a spark of purpose light within him. Something worth breathing for. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss one of these wild, true-life adventures. Tom Calloway eased the Lucky Catch toward shore, the early morning harbor light revealing every weathered dock post and barnacled hull. Steam from his raspy cough curled in the cool air as he gripped the wheel, knuckles pale with tension. He still couldn't shake the boy's terrified sobs echoing in his mind, or the blink of that strange red light strapped around the child's ankle. When the boat bumped gently against his usual berth, Tom cut the engine and paused. His shoulders sagged as fatigue and worry weighed upon him. He climbed down to the fish hold where Miguel had hidden himself beneath a draped fishing net. The boy's wide, fearful eyes followed him as Tom crouched, hands resting on gnarled knees. "I've been thinking," Tom rumbled, voice softer now. "Whatever you're running from, I can't just dump you on the dock and call it a day. My grandfather used to say a man's measure is shown by how he treats the helpless." He'd never much cared for his grandfather's stern ways. But now, faced with this trembling child, he yearned to be better than that. Miguel looked up hesitantly, soft hiccups still rattling his small frame. Tom slipped his phone into his pocket and offered a crooked smile of reassurance. "Okay, let's do this right." He peered into the dim hold and called gently, "What's your name, son?" The boy blinked back tears. "Miguel," he whispered. "Good to meet you, Miguel," Tom said, extending a calloused hand. "Now tell me why you're so scared." Miguel's gaze flitted toward the hatch, as if picturing unseen dangers lurking just beyond. "They'll find me," he breathed. "I need to hide, far away." A cold prickle ran down Tom's spine. He reached for an old fishing net lying across the deck. "Let's hide you from sight, at least until we figure out what's next." He draped the coarse mesh over Miguel, whose small shoulders hunched beneath it. With Miguel disguised beneath the net, Tom guided him off the boat and up the dock, mindful that the harbor was nearly deserted at this hour. Each creak of wood beneath their feet felt louder than usual, and the cries of distant gulls seemed to track their every step. Once inside his cramped cabin, its single bulb flickering overhead, Tom closed the door softly. He clicked on the light and stepped back as the mesh fell away, revealing Miguel in the harsh glow. The boy's dark eyes shimmered with hesitation as Tom approached and slipped on his thick glasses, the ones he rarely used on the water, now necessary to see Miguel clearly. Miguel looked so small beneath his oversized life vest and damp, soggy diaper. Tom's heart ached. He shuffled to a battered wardrobe and rummaged through his grandson's hand-me-down clothes, a faded t-shirt, shorts, and a pair of socks. As Miguel changed behind a makeshift curtain, Tom surveyed the cabin's walls. Cracked maps of reef channels, yellowed photos of triumphant catches, and newspaper clippings of storms survived. When Miguel emerged, dressed and blinking against the bulb's glare, Tom knelt beside him. The ankle device looked even more menacing now, a snug black band with a single red LED pulsing like a warning beacon. "What's this for?" Tom asked, voice low. Miguel swallowed. "Tracker," he admitted. "They put it on me at the camp. If I run, they find me." Tears welled again. "I had to get away." Tom's jaw clenched. Camps, trackers. He recalled stories of children fleeing violence or exploitation, packed onto flimsy boats and cast out to sea in hope of safety. He pressed a hand to his own chest, feeling the tickle of phlegm in his lungs, a reminder that his time wasn't limitless. But here, in Miguel's frightened face, Tom found a new purpose. "All right," he said, rising. "We're going to help you, kid. First, we need to get that thing off your ankle." He paused. "But I'm no doctor or tamperer. We'll have to be smart." Tom rummaged in a corner shelf for his trusty pocket knife, blunted by years of opening crates and cutting lines. He knelt beside Miguel once more, gently examining the tracker's clasp. "You got a cousin or friend in town? Someone who can help us?" he asked. Miguel shook his head. "No one here, only you." Tom's chest tightened. It would be dangerous, sure. He could be accused of kidnapping or harboring a runaway, but the boy's wide eyes held hope, and Tom knew, deep down, that he couldn't turn away. "Then we do it together," Tom declared, voice rough but resolute. He clicked the knife open. "Hold still, amigo." As the blade worked at the thin clasp, Miguel's breathing slowed, each snip of metal echoing in the small cabin. Finally, with a tiny click, the band fell loose. The red light winked out. Miguel stared at his ankle, incredulous. Tom tucked the tracker into his coat pocket and patted the boy's head. "Now you're free," he said quietly, "and we'll figure out the next step. Find a safe place for you." Miguel looked up shyly, hope finally flickering into a smile. For the first time since that terrified flash of blue, he seemed to breathe easier. Tom leaned back, glancing out the salt-crusted window at the harbor beyond. The sea, ever unpredictable, had delivered another twist to his quiet life. But as he met Miguel's grateful gaze, Tom realized that some catches were worth risking everything for, and whatever storms lay ahead, they'd face them together. Tom's chest tightened as the two men in ill-fitting security uniforms exchanged glances and stepped back onto the dock. He let out a slow breath, closing the door with measured calm that belied the storm of adrenaline in his veins. Behind him, Miguel crept out of his hiding spot, eyes wide with lingering fear. Tom placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "They're gone, for now," he murmured. "But we can't stay here." Every instinct told him their safety had just been compromised. Those men, he'd seen that red dot blinking on their map, right where the lucky catch had been tied. They were hunting for Miguel, and Tom had no idea who those men really were. He moved swiftly to the rickety cupboard by the stove, pulling out a battered thermos. "Drink this," he said, handing it to Miguel. "Keeps you warm and gives us time to think." The steaming coffee perked Miguel's spirits, at least enough that he managed a small nod. Closing his eyes for a moment, Tom ran a hand over his stubbled chin. He was just an old fisherman, sure, but he'd weathered hurricanes, rogue waves, even a heart attack last winter. He might not know the politics of refugee camps or the legalities of international child protection, but he knew people who did, and now seemed like the time to call in favors. "We're heading to Mrs. Alvarez's," he announced, unhooking his coat from the back of a chair. "She owns the bait shop down the road. She'll take one look at you and know something's wrong. She'll know what to do." Miguel's eyes flickered with a mixture of relief and worry. "Will they find me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Tom crouched to meet his gaze. "Not if we're smart about it. You're safe as long as they don't know where you are." He tugged the cabin curtains closed against prying eyes and led Miguel outside, guiding him past the rows of docked boats toward the narrow lane that wound through the sleepy harbor town. The morning sun climbed higher, stripping away the night's shadows, and fishermen busied themselves cleaning nets and repairing lines. Tom nodded curtly to a few, offering no explanation beyond a wave. He kept his head down, purposeful, while Miguel shuffled alongside, clutching the hem of Tom's coat. At Mrs. Alvarez's bait shop, the bell over the door jingled, a cheerful sound that felt jarringly out of place. The elderly widow bustled forward with practiced warmth, wiping her hands on an apron streaked with squid ink and grit. "Tom, mi amigo," she exclaimed, but when her gaze fell on Miguel's tremulous form, her eyes narrowed in concern. Tom swallowed, stepping into the cramped, salt-scented space. He spoke quickly, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Alvarez, I've got a boy here. He's lost, scared, and someone's tracking him." He showed her the red blinking tracker now safely tucked in his palm. Her face paled, then steeled with determination. "Stay here," she said, brusquely ushering them to a back room blocked from view. "I know people, legal aid, the Coast Guard liaison, even a pastor who helps families in crisis. We'll get him safe." Without another word, she slammed the door and slipped out. Miguel sank onto a rickety stool, gaze fixed on the chipped linoleum floor. Tom perched on a crate beside him, heart hammering. He felt the weight of every mile he'd traveled on those seas, every life-and-death choice he'd made. None mattered now, because here was a child whose fate rested in his hands. A muffled knock sounded at the back door, followed by the urgent voices of Mrs. Alvarez and another woman. Tom braced himself. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. He took Miguel's hand in his calloused grip and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." As the door swung open, Tom felt ready for whatever came through it, because sometimes even an old fisherman has to chart new waters to do what's right. Tom's jaw clenched as he stared at the unyielding band wrapped around Miguel's ankle. It wasn't a lifeline, it was a trap. Whatever safe for swimming the boy had mentioned, this device was anything but. With the police still 30 minutes out and those two guards prowling the docks, Tom knew time was their enemy. He limped over to the workbench, where cans of line cleaner, spare hooks, and a jumble of old tools lay scattered under a single bulb. His fingers closed on a pair of heavy wire cutters, sturdy enough to slice through fishing nets, but likely too blunt for this job. He shook his head. Then he spotted an old jeweler's file, its fine teeth still promising some leverage on metal. Gripping it in one hand and steadying Miguel's leg with the other, Tom set his jaw and got to work. "Hold still, amigo," he whispered, voice low so as not to jangle Miguel's nerves. The file rasped against the tracker's band, sending tiny shavings clinking onto the floor. Miguel winced, but didn't pull away. He trusted Tom enough to endure the discomfort. Every rasp of metal felt like an eternity as Tom's wrist ached and his lungs tightened with each hacking cough. He paused to clear his throat, careful not to alarm the boy. Finally, with a muted crack, the band gave way. Tom snatched a pair of pliers and twisted the ring free, lifting the device away from Miguel's reddened skin. The tracker's red LED blinked once in protest, then went dark. Tom dropped it onto the workbench, heart pounding as if he'd just hauled in a monster fish. "You're free," he said softly, brushing a hand over Miguel's trembling ankle to ease the bruised flesh. Miguel let out a shaky breath, relief and fear mingling in his wide eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, voice hoarse. Tom managed a tired smile, despite the ache that throbbed through his joints. "Let's hide that," he said, pocketing the device. "We don't want those men finding it, and us, again." He looked toward the curtained window, imagining the two guards scanning the docks for any sign of movement. With law enforcement still a half hour away, they had to disappear. Tom emptied a battered fishing bag, lined it with old towels, and helped Miguel slip inside, cocooned from sight. Then he grabbed his coat and swung the cabin door open, ushering them both into the narrow alley behind his shack. Outside, the harbor hummed with morning activity, fishermen hauling traps, gulls squabbling over scraps, the distant drone of a shrimp boat's engine. Tom blended into the bustle. Miguel pressed close to his side under the billowing coat, his small hand gripping Tom's. They slipped past the bait shop and through a tangle of pilings until the town's narrow street swallowed them. As they walked, Tom felt Miguel's fingers tremble against his own. He squeezed them. "We're almost there," he murmured. Up ahead, a weathered sign swung above a small chapel, St. Mary's Outreach, where Father Ruiz sheltered those with nowhere else to turn. Tom had met the good priest in passing and knew he cared for lost souls as fiercely as Tom cared for his nets. They slipped inside. The afternoon sun filtered through stained glass windows, painting the wooden pews in hues of ruby and sapphire. Father Ruiz looked up from the bulletin board, concern etching his gentle face when he saw Miguel's frightened expression. Tom laid out the boy's story in clipped sentences, his cough interrupting now and then, as Miguel huddled beside him. Father Ruiz's eyes softened. "Lord have mercy," he murmured. He stooped to Miguel's level, offering a warm blanket. "You are safe here, my son." Turning to Tom, he beckoned them to a back room where phones worked and no questions would be asked. "We'll keep him until your officers arrive," the priest promised. Tom exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time all morning. He glanced at Miguel, who gave him a small, grateful smile. Whatever storms lay ahead, they'd weather them, together, and for now, that was enough. They were almost clear of the harbor when Tom spotted them. Two dark silhouettes racing down the dock, leaping into their own skiff. His heart hammered. "They've got a boat!" he hissed, slamming the throttle forward. The Lucky Catch surged ahead, its wake churning the placid water into white froth. Behind them, the pursuer's engine roared to life. Tom gripped the wheel, sweat slick on his brow despite the salt spray. "Hold on, Miguel!" he shouted over the din, mashing the throttle as hard as the old engine would take. The boat bucked beneath them, but Tom steered straight for the channel marker. Miguel peered through the cabin porthole, eyes wide with fear, clutching the bench beside him. Tom's voice crackled through the small speaker. "Stay low. Don't make a sound until I say so." They slipped past the channel into deeper water, and Tom ducked his head, wiping sea spray and sweat from his eyes. The two dark shapes on the dock grew smaller by the second, their skiff struggling to catch up against the Lucky Catch's momentum. But water was an equalizer. Tom knew every hidden sandbar, every eddy and current. He angled toward a narrow, shoal-lined inlet that only a true Keys fisherman would dare navigate. Tom's hands flew over the wheel as the water shallowed beneath the hull. Miguel, huddled in the cabin, felt the boat tilt, heard the keel grate on hidden coral. Then, with a sudden lurch, they skidded over the sandbar and through one narrow channel, while the pursuers, in their larger, deeper draft boat, ground to a halt. Tom didn't pause to gloat. He punched the throttle again and shot through the winding inlet, the tight turns forcing the larger skiff to circle helplessly at the entrance. Waves slapped against the hull as he emerged into open water beyond. For a moment, the only sound was the Lucky Catch's steady engine. Tom exhaled a long, shaky breath and scanned the horizon. No sign of them. "We lost them," he murmured, relief and fatigue washing through him. Inside the cabin, Miguel emerged, blinking against the bright sun. Tom held out a hand and helped him up onto the deck. The boy's lips trembled, but he managed a trembling smile. "We okay?" he whispered. Tom nodded, voice hoarse. "For now," he said, "but we need to get you to someone who can protect you, somewhere safe." He reached into his coat and pulled out his sat phone, hoping the signal would hold this far offshore. As he dialed, Tom glanced back toward the inlet, where the locked pursuer's boat bobbed frozen in the shallows. Behind them lay the harbor. Danger, but also the only path to help. He tapped the sat phone again and again. Finally, a crackle. "Coast Guard, how can I help?" Tom's voice was steady as he gave coordinates. "Unmarked skiff beached in a narrow inlet off Stock Island. 2 armed men aboard. I'm escorting a minor in need of immediate protection." "Copy that, sir. We'll dispatch assets now. ETA 20 minutes. Tom hung up and turned to Miguel, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Help's coming," he promised. "You're safe with me." Miguel nodded, tears of relief brimming in his eyes. Tom guided the Lucky Catch toward the mainland shore, each rotation of the propeller bringing them closer to safety and further from the men who meant them harm. As the coast came into view, Tom felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. He'd risked everything, his safety, his peace, to keep this boy alive. And now, with the sea behind them and help ahead, Tom knew that some catches were more precious than any fish. Tom's heart pounded like a drum in his chest as the barrel of the pistol pressed into his back. The salty breeze that usually soothed him now felt like icy needles against his skin. Below, he could hear Miguel's frantic sobs, each one a razor to his resolve. His lungs rattled with the weight of his chronic cough, but adrenaline shut out the pain. He forced himself to speak calmly. "All right," he rasped, raising his hands in a slow, deliberate gesture of surrender. "I'll show you." His mind raced for any possible escape, any flicker of hope that might save Miguel without costing them both their lives. The taller man sneered and jabbed the gun further into Tom's ribs. "Move!" he snarled. With a shove that nearly sent him sprawling, Tom staggered toward the cabin door, every step a battle against the urge to bolt or collapse. Behind him, the second trafficker leaned over the side of their speedboat, engine idling ominously close. With shaking fingers, Tom fished the cabin key from his coat pocket. The metal was slick and cold. He inserted it into the rusted lock and twisted. The door creaked open, and Miguel's muffled cry grew louder. "Together, old man," the gunman barked. "Open it now." Tom took a split-second gamble. He yanked the door wide, and then, with every ounce of strength left in his aging frame, he flung it forward into the gunman. The man staggered back, pistol firing a wild shot that tore into the cabin wall inches from Tom's ear. The deafening blast sent splinters of wood into the air. "Go!" Tom roared, grabbing Miguel with his free arm. He hoisted the boy over his shoulder like a sack of feed and ducked back into the cabin just as the second trafficker lunged forward. Tom slammed the door shut and twisted the bolt lock with one hand, keeping Miguel cradled against him. The trafficker pounded on the other side, cursing and hammering the wood. Tom pressed Miguel close. "Stay down, mijo," he whispered, placing a trembling finger to his lips. Miguel's eyes were wide and terrified, but he nodded, burying his face against Tom's neck. Outside, the traffickers cursed and threatened, thundering on the door. Tom slid to the floor, back against the wall, as the Lucky Catch's engine rumbled overhead. He put one ear to the cabin door, straining to hear their plans. The gunmen outside swore they'd blast it down. The one on the deck barked orders to prepare to ram the boat if Tom tried to escape. Tom closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every year at sea press down upon him. He pictured his grandfather, stern, uncompromising, demanding toughness in the face of danger. But this wasn't about brute force. Old fisherman intuition told him he needed wit. Silently, Tom edged toward the small porthole that looked out onto the dock. He nudged Miguel's shoulder. "Can you hold still?" he whispered. The boy trembled, but managed a nod. With trembling fingers, Tom cracked open the port. Outside, moonlight glinted off the dark hull of their pursuer's speedboat, tied up too close to the dock, a sliver of open water beyond, the passage back to safety. Tom glanced at Miguel's pale face and steeled himself. He found a length of rope coiled in the corner, a spare docking line. Tying one end to his belt and the other around the cabin's heavy bolt throw, he whispered to Miguel, "When I give the word, I'm going to open the door, and you run straight to me. Got it?" Miguel swallowed and nodded, clutching Tom's coat sleeve. The pounding outside intensified. The traffickers had abandoned subtlety. Tom counted to 3 in his head. "Now!" he hissed. He unlocked the bolt and yanked open the door. The 2 men, one still clutching the revolver, rushed in. Tom let Miguel slip from his grip and dashed forward, forcing them both into a tight chokehold. He swung his free arm and smashed the butt of the bolt cutter into the gunman's hand, sending the weapon skittering across the cabin floor. The second trafficker tried to shove Tom away, but Tom's rope belt secured him to the doorframe, anchoring him like a barnacle to the hull. "Go, Miguel!" Tom shouted, wrestling the larger man into the cabin wall. The boy bolted past, scrambling across the deck, plunging into the wheelhouse. Tom tore the pistol from the first man's grasp and hucked it toward the cabin window. The gun shattered against the dock's pilings below. Outside, engines revved as the traffickers realized Tom had cut the power line leading back to their boat. They chased after Miguel, but Tom lunged between them and the cabin hatch, leading them on a wild dance around the small vessel. "This way!" he shouted, voice cracking with effort. In the wheelhouse, Miguel fumbled with the ignition switch that Tom had shown him earlier. The Lucky Catch's engine coughed, then roared to life once more. Tom saw his chance. The speedboat was still tied alongside, its crew distracted. "Head for the bow," Tom barked to the boy. Miguel scrambled up the steps and grabbed hold of the forward rail, just as Tom disentangled himself from the traffickers. He sprinted to the stern, dove over the transom, and swam to the speedboat's hull. Below deck, he found the lines that bound it to the dock. Gasping, he cut them with the bolt cutter left hooked to his belt. Above, Miguel steered the Lucky Catch straight toward Tom's position. The traffickers, having broken free of Tom's rope, sprinted onto the deck of their own craft, but Tom kicked off and crabbed across the water toward freedom. Miguel recognized his grandfather's old commands. "Steady, steady, hard to port!" With a lurch, the Lucky Catch slid alongside the larger speedboat. Tom wrapped his arm around the rail and hauled himself aboard, then ducked below to reorganize the throttle cables so the boat could run without the wheelhouse. Miguel climbed down after him. Tom cranked the throttle harness, glancing through the cabin's rear window as the traffickers leapt from their own beached craft into the water. The Lucky Catch's propeller sliced through the gentle swells, carrying Tom and Miguel away. Behind them, the other boat floundered in the shallows, its engines spluttering. The pair surged into open water, hearts pounding but unbowed, clinging to the promise that beyond the horizon lay safety and a world where a frightened boy could finally be free. Miguel's small smile lit the sterile room brighter than any lamp. Tom's chest tightened as he struggled upright again, this time against the gentle urging of the officer and the doctor. The doctor stepped forward, a kindly man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Mr. Calloway, you're fortunate," he said quietly. "You sustained several bruised ribs and a mild concussion, but you'll recover fully. You've been through a lot." He glanced at the monitors. "We kept you overnight for observation, but I expect you'll be up and walking by tomorrow." Tom nodded, swallowing against the ache in his throat. "Thank you, doctor." His gaze swung back to the boy. "And Miguel?" The officer knelt by Miguel's side. "He's fine, just a little shaken. We did a full check. He's unharmed. She offered Miguel a small coloring book and crayons, which he accepted with solemn gratitude. Before Tom could reply, the door opened again, and a woman hurried in, a petite, anxious figure whose eyes flew instantly to Miguel. "Mi hijo!" she cried, scooping him into her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed him close, brushing hair from his forehead. Miguel buried his face against her shoulder, sobbing with relief. Tom's throat caught. He watched as the boy's mother cradled him, murmuring soft Spanish reassurances. The officers exchanged glances, then gave Tom space, while ensuring mother and son could reunite fully. When the room quieted, the woman looked up at Tom, eyes red-rimmed but shining with gratitude. Though fatigue etched her features, her smile was fierce. "Thank you," she said in accented English. "Thank you for saving my Miguel." She reached out, placing a hand over Tom's. Tom winced slightly at the movement, but returned her grip firmly. "It was my honor," he rasped. "He's as strong as they come." The officer cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Calloway, we have paperwork and statements to complete, but take your time. You've earned some rest." Tom nodded, settling back against the pillows as the boy's mother settled Miguel beside him. The coloring book lay open between them, and soon Miguel was carefully filling a page with bright crayons, each careful stroke a testament to his renewed safety. Outside, the sunset stained the hospital window in hues of fiery orange and pink as Officer Mona Eleni offered Tom Calloway a steadying hand. "You saved my life, Mr. Calloway," she said softly, stepping forward with a relieved smile. "I'm Mona Eleni. How are you feeling?" Tom managed a raspy grin. "Like I've been hit by a truck," he grumbled, wincing as he shifted. His voice was rough, but his eyes were clear, because Miguel was safe, and that was all that mattered. "Doctor." Patel, standing quietly by, cleared his throat. "Tom, you've got several broken ribs, a mild concussion, and a few contusions. We've also heard some concerning lung sounds we need to investigate further." Tom waved him off, though each movement brought a fresh stab of pain. "Doc, I've dealt with crackling lungs for years. That can wait. Right now, tell me what happened after I blacked out. Those traffickers, were they arrested?" Officer Elani's face turned serious. "Yes, thanks to your bravery and the details you provided, we intercepted the smugglers. They're all in custody, facing charges from attempted kidnapping to weapons possession. And Miguel here has been incredibly brave, too." Miguel looked down in modesty, but Tom reached out, laying a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did great, son. You were so brave." Tom's relief turned to concern. "What about Miguel's family? His mother? Have you found her?" Elani exchanged a solemn glance with Miguel before answering. "It's complicated. We learned Miguel's mother was involved with the traffickers. Border Patrol detained her before she could escape. We believe she tried to sell Miguel to settle her late husband's debts." Tom's heart sank. He saw the pain flicker across Miguel's face, the young boy's world shattered by betrayal. "My God," Tom whispered, "what that child's been through." Clearing his throat, Tom asked, "What happens next? Does Miguel have any other relatives here?" Elani shook her head. "None in the U.S. We're still confirming contacts in Cuba, but it looks like he has no surviving family. For now, we'll place him in protective custody while working with Cuban authorities." Miguel's eyes widened, panic rising. "Please, can I stay with Tom?" he blurted, voice trembling. "If not, orphanage, or worse, the street." Elani's expression softened. "I can't promise, Miguel, but we'll explore every option. Mr. Calloway, would you be willing to become his guardian?" Tom felt those words fitting him like a second skin. He'd never imagined fatherhood at his age, but he knew in his bones this was right. "I know I'm no millionaire," he said, voice steady despite a fresh cough. "But I make a decent living as a fisherman. My son sends support every month. We can provide for Miguel." Elani nodded thoughtfully. "There are legal steps, social services, international clearances, and we'd need to talk to your son as well. But we'll start that process. For now, we'll need your formal statement at the station when you're able." Tom offered a determined nod. "Whatever it takes." As Alani prepared to lead Miguel away, the boy suddenly slipped from her gentle hold and ran back to Tom's bedside. He threw his small arms around the old fisherman. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with gratitude, "for saving me." Tom's eyes burned with unshed tears as he returned the hug. "You're welcome, son," he murmured, voice cracking. "You're welcome." The door closed behind them, and Tom sank back onto the pillows. Though his body ached, his spirit felt renewed. Outside, the sunset deepened, just like the closing of an old chapter and the dawn of a new one. As his eyes grew heavy, Tom let himself dream of mornings on the water, teaching Miguel to bait his first hook, marveling at dolphins dancing in the bow wake, sharing quiet dawns full of promise. Tomorrow would bring interviews and paperwork and perhaps even court hearings. But tonight, he held hope in his heart, because he no longer fought just for himself. He had someone truly worth protecting. And with that comforting thought, Tom Calloway drifted into a well-earned sleep, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead.